Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 401k Marketing Podcast. Today, we are joined by Blake Allison, the founder and CEO of LifeCents, which is a financial wellness technology platform. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited to dive in deeper into financial wellness with you today.
Awesome. Well, let's kick it off with our first question. You have 20 plus, we're just going to go with the plus years of experience in financial wellness now. So you've seen it change probably a lot and defined and get more kind of structure around it. So my first question for you today, how do you define financial wellness?
Always the million-dollar question. If you ask 100 people, you're going to get 100 different answers. I think at the core, there's kind of a technical definition, which is someone who's financially healthy can meet their current and future financial obligations, but having some essence of flexibility and resilience to adapt to life's changes. Because we all face unexpected life events, but being able to have that resiliency and still be in control, I think, is important. But I think what has really come out over more recent years is the idea that there are some other less obvious elements, awareness, knowing what your current financial situation is, what your needs are, setting realistic and achievable goals for the future. And also, I think having a plan and having the ability to make informed decisions against that plan is important. And then lastly, interestingly, having access to the right financial products and services. And that's something that, financial access and inclusion is really a growing, or lack of financial access and inclusion is a growing issue. But kind of in a nutshell, I think that's, maybe of the 100 people, that's my one answer. And again, you'll probably get different answers, but I think that's how we've seen things evolve over years.
So I've never heard, I've never heard it put the way of financial access and inclusion in terms of the definition of financial wellness before, but that makes sense, makes perfect sense. Why do you believe employees should have access to financial wellness?
So there is so much research and so much evidence that the employees are facing, inordinate financial challenges. There's a organization, the Financial Health Network, that puts out great research, and they have recent research has shown that only 30% of Americans are considered financially healthy, and this is people living paycheck to paycheck, swimming in debt. But the reality affects more than just their wallets. Financial stress is impacting other aspects of their life, mental and physical health. Yeah. And these things are going to follow people into the workplace. And so I think from a purely human perspective, it totally makes sense for companies to offer financial wellness programs and provide access to these types of tools and resources. But I think it also kind of begs the question of whose bottom line are we trying to help? Is it the employee or the employers? Because certainly there is evidence that financially healthy employees can add value to a company through increased productivity, reduce absenteeism and presenteeism, et cetera. Yeah. But I think sometimes those are for most businesses, those are measures that are very hard to measure. How do you measure productivity, and how do you control for a single variable like financial wellness as the factor that has contributed to that increased productivity? So I think we have to just manage expectations a little bit better about what we can expect realistically from financial wellness programs. And so really looking at these as long-term investments in employee well-being generally. And then, ultimately it's a business decision. Do you want to support your employees? And I always ask, if question. I ask a question for myself, but the idea, $1 million question, would you, if an employer were to offer a financial wellness program and there was no direct measurable impact on that business's bottom line,
Mhm.
yet individually people were doing better, would you as a business, would you as an employer still make an investment in financial wellness? And so it comes down whose bottom line is most important. It's almost it's a interesting question. I tend to ask that quite often to see how clients and partners and prospective clients respond, because I think it really kind of unearths motivation and also what expectations are of what can be achieved.
I always think of financial wellness programs as, I don't mean this to sound out of place, but I think of it as a way to maximize employer dollars. So it's like a tiny fraction of grand payroll. So gross payroll, grand payroll for today's dialogue, but it's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of that amount. You invest it in your financial wellness program. All of a sudden, your employees aren't um, looking at their bank account statements and doing the Our Father and freaking out. Rather, they're looking at it and going, "Wow, like, how do I have like $200 more this month? What happened?"
Mm.
And it's like those little tiny shifts over time, and it's because they learned about like paying down debt, like the snowball method or the avalanche method, and they got on top of it, and they feel really good. Like they feel good about it, and it was a tiny little fraction. And this is where I put the breadcrumbs together. As an employer, your bonuses that you have to pay out to your employees now can be less because they're not freaking out about some giant credit card bill because it's much smaller because they've been making like kind of chipping away at it. So then when you give them that bonus amount, whatever the number is, it doesn't immediately get put into paying down some sort of debt avenue. Instead, it's like, oh, this is, what do I do with this? And that's a great question to ask because that gives you a lot more freedom and flexibility.
I mean, that's a great outcome for anybody. I will politely kind of provide a different perspective on that, which is, first of all, we have to understand what the needs of the employees are, and so. Is chipping away at debt important to you? Is it important to me?
Mm-hmm.
I think perspective matters, context matters. So, if you and I both say that we have $5,000 in credit card debt, and I'm flipping out about that, and you're like, no, that's fine. Is that the right measure? Of a program, because it's really what we have to understand is the impact of debt. So it doesn't matter how much debt you and I have, it's actually what the impact of that debt is on each one of us. So are you stressed and I'm not, or vice versa? So what we really should be looking at across an employee population is, are we able to improve, reduce stress? Are we able to look at these measures of financial health, not from a numeric perspective, but from a behavioral perspective, an attitudinal perspective, and say, okay, am I in a better place today than I was 6 months ago and then when I was a year ago? And again, me being in a better place and me being less stressed might be different than how and why you're in a better place. And so if you think about, I think a great analogy for financial wellness is our physical wellness. And so if we both, if our doctor both tells both of us that we need to be more active and maybe we need to lose weight or something like that, does it matter what activities you decide to engage in versus what activities I decide to engage in? Or does it matter that we both have achieved that goal? So I think what happens is financial wellness programs, if they are not designed properly, become very prescriptive, saying you need to do this and you need to do it this amount and you did. That is not, and I think that's one of the reasons why financial wellness programs have not seen the success that they should see based on the investments and the time, energy, and resources that are being put into them.
I love that analogy. I was getting, like, some people might like boxing, some people might like cycling, some people might like yoga, and that's okay. It's as long as you're moving your body. Huh. Hey, we talked a little bit about killing the mosquito with a sledgehammer, which I think is a fun Fun term. Killing the mosquito with a sledgehammer. So, as an employer, why should they care about the amount of debt that employees have?
So I think that two things in that. Let's unpack killing the mosquito with a sledgehammer, because it's one of my favorite
Love
expressions.
it.
So anybody that's listening to this who has heard me speak before is rolling their eyes because it's one of my analogies. But I think kind of starting at the top. So I think many financial wellness programs overpromise and over-engineer solutions that don't align with how people actually behave. So
Mhm.
I think many companies are essentially creating very sophisticated, complex solutions that might look impressive on paper, but they don't resonate with the everyday challenges people face, or they're not addressing the needs that people have. And so
Mhm.
what we see is that the solutions are often more designed on what's possible with technology rather than what people actually want and need.
Mm.
So maybe said a little bit differently, it's very easy to ideate on ideas and solutions of what we can build with technology rather than focusing on employees and what they actually need to improve their lives. And so very often solutions will be overly complex, irrelevant, and in some ways intimidating to the employees. And so that's where we see why we see engagement is so low. And if you think about this, it's kind of interesting. Think about solutions that help kind of create dashboards, bring your financial life, into one place. You can see, you can track your spending and, see how you're doing on paying down debt and savings, everything like that. That's great. But if you look at, the fact that 20% of people struggle interpreting bar charts, or 60% of people have a very difficult time interpreting logarithmic
Sure.
charts like a compound interest graph.
Yeah. Hmm.
So we're thinking about these solutions like, oh, let's visualize all this stuff for people. But the reality is we have to also understand the capabilities of the user. And
Yeah.
so, and if I think, more recently, and I think it was in 2024, Mint.com. It was the 800-pound gorilla in account aggregation and helping people budget.
Yeah.
And rest in peace, Mint.com shuttered its doors, and we have to ask why. I think that's a very important use case and business case of what kinds of solutions are we building. I mean, why would an app like Mint shutter its doors supposedly with 3+ million users? People weren't engaging. It wasn't working the way everyone ideated on this. So I think it's a very good use case on, killing the mosquito with a sledgehammer. It's like we just have to have the right solutions for the right people.
There's a book from years ago called The Good American, and it was about traveling abroad, and there was these people bent over sweeping, and they had all these crazy ideas about robots sweeping, and we'll bring in trash trucks. And some smart person just said, let's just make the handle longer. So that way people, as they're older, are bending over, but the handle's just longer so they can sweep just standing up. Like a very small change, huge impact. Didn't need robots, didn't need space, didn't need automation or anything wild. Just make the handle a little longer.
And it's a perfect example. So in addition to LifeCents as the financial wellness technology platform, we do a lot of consulting with very large organizations, a lot of financial services companies. We've done a lot of work abroad as well, and time again, as we get into the weeds with these companies to understand what they think their strategy is and their roadmap. We talk them off the ledge and say, you are throwing good money after bad because you are creating yet another app, another solution. It's like, you're losing money on every sale, so we need to sell more. It's like you're not getting engagement with this app, so we need to build another one. And there are companies that have multiple apps. They keep building apps, and it's like, is it the app, or is it you're not solving the right problems? And so I think it's a very, very important part of this dialogue as we look at why financial wellness programs are not delivering the impact that people need and that businesses seek. So you can put a lot of good money into well-intended ideas, but it is very easy and it is exciting. I mean, I could spend all day long thinking about what I want LifeCents as a product to do, but I am not the end user, all the time. We have to look at, there are different people with different needs. And so we have to make sure that we understand what's going on. And that's where we start. I think that, kind of a broader question of why don't financial wellness programs work? If you are not putting your employees through a robust and comprehensive financial health assessment before you implement before you even think about designing a financial wellness program, I think it's a very expensive misstep, because you could not assume that you understand the needs and the financial goals, the needs, the life events that are driving people's decisions, what keeps people up at night. If you don't have that information, it is impossible to put together a program that is going to meet people where they are. And we talk about, everyone talks about, you've got to meet people where you are. You've got to make it personalized. Well, if you don't have that information, how do you personalize a solution?
I've never heard of that before, where you anonymously survey your employees first to understand what programs, modules, overviews, calculators, etc. you would need to bake into your financial wellness program anonymously. So
right,
there's lots of options, but it's kind of tailored towards, we know you have, you're taking care of, you have, what's it called? Where you have an older parent and you're taking care of your caregiver, which is very common, becoming more and more statistically common in our country today, whether it's an older parent or a child. So juggling both sides of that. So you would have a module in there, and then that person would log in and say, oh, look at this module. I'd like to watch it or interact with it in some way. I always thought that financial wellness programs were kind of like, here you go. It's on. I didn't realize that you could customize them in that way to be specific.
Well, I think that's
each employee base.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference. If you're looking at an out of the box solution, you're going to get out of the box results. And I think going back as well. So looking it's fascinating on this side of the conversation, where we are working with clients and partners, where we're implementing financial wellness assessments, robust ones, not 5 or 10 questions. That's not going to give you the information you need. It's a start, but you need something that you really have to understand, who I am as a person, what my financial story is, where am I trying to go, what are my current circumstances, what are my limitations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's fascinating to see this information, but also keeping in mind that very often financial wellness solutions are through the lens of, maybe it's the retirement plan provider, the record keeper, advisors, who are dealing with more sophisticated financial matters. But when you go back to one of my opening statistics, 60-70% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. And so I fully agree that yes, we need to find the people that will benefit from or would need help with planning for long-term care, or being a caregiver, or yes, I'm nearing retirement. But that is a much smaller percentage or proportion of the employee population that needs help with the day-to-day money management, where I am stressed because I am worried about paying my bills. and this is not limited. We have a great case study, and we see it all the time, where we were working with an employer, 20,000 person healthcare company. All the employees were well paid with great benefits. And the employer is like, okay, well, we admit that we're not seeing the contributions in the 401k we thought, but they're well paid and they've got great benefits. They don't need a financial wellness program. And we persisted and said, humor us and let us implement the financial wellness assessment. We did it through what we call a 45-day challenge to make it exciting. We got a lot of participation. And it came back that 88% of the employees were either stressed or very stressed about their financial situation, and 67% were living paycheck to paycheck. And they're like, holy cow, we didn't know this. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
of course you didn't know this because you didn't ask them.
Right.
Right. And then also the reason that the contribution rates were not higher in the 401k is because, yes, they were well paid with great benefits, because most of these healthcare workers had advanced degrees. But with those advanced degrees, they were carrying a lot of student loan debt. So it was the student loan debt that was the impediment to higher contribution rates. So it's an iterative process. And so this is, again, looking at, what is the process to get an employee to unlock and realize the benefits of a financial wellness program. It is not, as you said, hey, let's pull this out of the box and say, hey, this is here ready for people to use. You have to design something that is very intentionally and very strategically. And I think that's, a very important part of the process to make a program successful.
Makes sense. Well, we talked a little bit about why financial wellness doesn't work. So thank you for that. That was very interesting. And so tell us about
I can go on.
Yeah, I have the back. Don't worry. So let's talk about what is LifeCents? How are you different? I think we're starting to get into that personalization side. Can you expand on that for us?
Yeah, and if I can very quickly, you asked, why would an employer want to know about the $5,000 in debt? Can we touch on that?
Yeah, of course.
So specifically, why I think you asked why should an employer care about how much debt someone has as an example? Yeah. And in short, they shouldn't. First of all, first of all, people are not going to openly share how much debt they have, or that they have a lack of savings, or that they're behind on bills. And I think it's a pretty common fact now that people are more willing to talk about their sex life than they are about their financial life. and so. Sorry, I hope that's appropriate for the podcast.
It is.
It's a fact. So I think this is an example where we have to challenge the underlying assumptions or narrative that has become the foundation of financial wellness over the years. And so people are more than numbers, and so we have to look at financial wellness through a behavioral lens. So this is not about, as we talked about, is $5,000 in debt a lot to you, or is it not a lot? Is it a lot to me or not? And it is a matter of personal perspective, but it is what matters is how that lands on me. And so again, what employers should care about, again, no one's going to open up the kimono and be like, hey, I went from $55,000 in credit card debt. Now I'm down to $15,000 credit card debt. What you want to see is are you doing better on this path? Because again, if you set, hey, let's have everyone, let's a measure of success for, this financial wellness program is that people are lowering their debt. Well, I don't have any debt. So I'm going to skew numbers. Outside of a mortgage, of course, but it's more than that. It is that may not be relevant to people. I may have more pressing matters, which is I'm not paying my bill. I can't pay my bill, so I'm not worried about. So we just have to look at the relative measures, and are you in a better place? And I think that is where it's a win for financial wellness, is to say, hey, it is personalized because you are making progress to the things that are making impact in your life, not a generic outcome. So thank you for allowing me to
Makes sense. Because if you think of the roadmap, that the way that I think of financial wellness is it's a roadmap, and it starts off in kind of Maslow's hierarchy. So you've got saving and budgeting, credit cards, and then you have sort of some of the accumulation piles. So you've got checking accounts, savings accounts, investment accounts, brokerage accounts, advisory accounts, retirement planning, estate planning, kind of the top of the financial pyramid. And you have every person go through their respective module. But as you just said, that doesn't apply to everyone. It's not appropriate to have someone go through budgeting 101 if they've got no debt and they're really good at budgeting and they like investing and they're actually farther up on the triangle in terms of needs, which is probably where a great conversation with an advisor would help out in that capacity.
Exactly. So truly, when people talk about a personal financial wellness program and meeting people where they are, it is exactly what you just described. But most programs are not doing that. And even though programs market themselves as being personalized,
Sure.
they are not delivering on what you just described, and which is what is needed. And now to answer your question about what is LifeCents. So if we can kind of summarize all these things that we've been talking about, that is what we do. Where I think we have, with 20 years in this space, we have had the opportunity to work on a lot of different initiatives with a lot of different types of organizations. Not just employers, not just financial services companies, but we've done a lot with community initiatives. We've worked with government agencies, nonprofits, et cetera. And each one of those has informed how we approach financial wellness and how we have crafted and architected and we continue to improve LifeCents as a technology. And so I always liken LifeCents, to being the primary care physician for financial health, where we will establish a relationship with you and understand what's going on with you, as much as your primary care physician does. They're going to want to know what's going on. There are certain metrics that they are going to always track: your blood pressure and your BMI and et cetera. Much as we discussed at the beginning of this conversation, there are a lot of metrics. There are a number of metrics that, like if you have adequate liquid savings, if you have a prime credit score, these are research-based metrics to suggest that you are in good financial health. But what we do is, if someone comes in and we unearth, that awareness piece, where someone has symptoms, we want to dive deeper to understand what the symptom, what's behind the symptom. So we want to find out, well, why are you not paying your bills on time? Much like a doctor, if you come in with a chest pain, is that chest pain heartburn or is that heart attack?
Yeah. Very different.
Very, very different. And so the approaches need to be different as well. And so I think from our perspective, we're looking at this through a behavioral lens. We understand people are more than numbers. We are focused on outcomes that matter. I think the flexibility in how we've architected LifeCents as a technology allows us to easily configure and customize LifeCents to align with an organization, a community of people, or various initiatives, so it is relevant. So we've done a lot of very cool work with, I guess maybe said differently is, if your financial wellness program does not have, is not unearthing things like, are you a veteran? Do you identify as with the LGBTQ community? Are you unbanked or underbanked?
Yeah.
If financial wellness programs are not also addressing those dimensions of who you are as a person, missing out on tremendous opportunities to really help people. So, veterans is a great example. I mean, they have very different benefits than civilians. And so, many employers have veterans as employees. And so if you're not also, addressing those needs, it's very, very short-sighted. So all of these things really contribute. All these things matter to a successful program. And any one missing ingredient, much like a recipe for food or like a cake, if you're missing one ingredient, you're not going to have the cake. You're not going to have the cookie.
Oh, that's funny. I'm laughing. Great examples.
I have analogies.
I'm laughing because the other day I was baking with my kid and I didn't have half of the ingredients we were supposed to. But she's 3, so it's more about putting stuff in the bowl and mixing and having fun and like getting messy. It's not about the final product. But I literally had like nothing that we were supposed to. I think it was supposed to be like a banana bread. I didn't even have bananas. Or whatever. Just throw it in, mix it around. We'll have fun.
Yeah, I can empathize.
Well, let's round out today's conversation. And you mentioned something earlier, and I want to dive back into this. Who who is financial wellness trying to help?
I think I have had several $1 million questions. I've identified several $1 million questions in this. This is another one, which is, I think that is one of the roles of financial wellness. So if obviously in the employer-employee relationship, if the employer is providing a financial wellness program for its employees, the short answer is employees. But the reality is, it is until you unearth who your employees are, not assuming that you know who they are, you will discover that you have people who are living paycheck to paycheck. You're going to have veterans. You're going to have people who are unbanked and underbanked, or a combination of these things. You're going to have people that are nearing retirement, who are trying to save for retirement, or they're looking to buy a home, start a family. So it is financial wellness programs need to help individuals as individuals, where personal finance is personal first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
So if an employer is offering a financial wellness program, it is indeed for the employees, but who the employees are matters more than anything. And so there has to be a mechanism to build that relationship, to understand who they are, so the right solution or solutions or pathways or resources can be provided to them. And that may be my shortest answer, but I think that is the lens through which we have to look at who financial wellness is intended to help.
Love it. All right. Well, Blake, thank you so much for joining today's podcast. If people have questions about LifeCents, they want to have more information, a demonstration of the technology, how can they contact you?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much for having me, for sure. I love the conversation. Appreciate the opportunity to kind of share LifeCents' perspective and my perspective on our experience with financial wellness. So our website is www.lifecents.com. That's CENTS. And directly my email is blake@lifecents.com. So I would be more than happy to continue having this conversation with anyone who would like to learn more. And if I can be a resource, I would love that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Blake, for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for listening to today's 401k Marketing Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of our guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of 401k Marketing. The content has been available for informational and educational purposes only. We hope you enjoyed.